The Art of Learning to Love Yourself by Natty on AO3. Read to you by Just a Lot of Trees. Part 9. New faces, hostile spaces. When can I go home? Summary. Neito flops onto Izuku's bed with a sigh. I can't believe the first day of classes is tomorrow, he bemoans. Neither can I, Izuku replies with a sigh, leaning against the bed from the floor. Well, I can't believe you live in a whole nother building. Hitoshi laughs from where he's sprawled on the carpet, and he's hit by Izuku's pillow, thrown by Neito. Shouto hums from where he's laying on Izuku's lap and asks, "What do you think Aizawa-san will have us do tomorrow?" All of them turn to Izuku, and he sputters. How am I supposed to know that? No warnings are given for this chapter. Izuku has been excited to come to UA for as long as he can remember. For the longest time, it was a dream, something he knew was so far out of his reach, but he couldn't help but stretch his small hand towards it. And then, when he met Aizawa-san, Hito, Sho, Neito, and Mei-chan, the dream started to look more like a hefty goal than the lofty dream he thought it was. When Katsuki had stayed away from him after the hospital incident, the goal looked doable. Izuku, kiddo, Aizawa-san had said in the room, Shouto and Hitoshi across from him, and Mei-chan holding on to him, and Neito not too far away. I can't let this slide. He runs a hand through Izuku's hair, mindful of the bandages on his face. Recovery Girl will be in shortly now that he's awake, and the burn is expected to scar, but there shouldn't be any lasting nerve or muscle damage. I know, Izuku says in a soft voice. He doesn't want it. He knows Katsuki could be a great hero. He has to be. Izuku doesn't like the alternative for someone with as powerful a quirk and volatile personality as him. But even Izuku knows that it went too far this time. Had he not called Aizawa-san, and had Hitoshi not been a witness, maybe Izuku would have fought harder against punishing the blonde, but seeing their faces when he woke up, he can't bring himself to fight it, no matter how much the guilt eats at his stomach. As a pro-hero, I heard clear evidence of assault and battery, as well as illegal quirk usage. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to record the call, so the evidence is considered circumstantial, so we likely won't be able to do more than put him on a red list from other hero schools. Aizawa-san says, and Izuku knows it's just for the comfort of a present voice. He's not truly able to pay close attention to the words, but they soak into his ears and file into his brain for him to think about later. Later, when the press of Shouto's lips against his isn't as fresh, or Hitoshi's eyes lose their worry and hands lose their delicacy. Of course, he's being blacklisted from UA, but I can't guarantee anything with the other hero schools. Before this, Bakugo had a spotless record, so chances are most of them will ignore this incident. I'm glad he can still be a hero, Izuku mumbles, leaning into the hand still carding through his hair and immediately feeling the disapproval of everyone else in the room. If he can't be a hero, I don't want to think about what he'll do. That sentence hangs heavily in the air, weighing the silence. It's only broken when Mum comes back, arms laden with drinks. Now that he's in the school building, everything seems so big and untouchable again. It feels like he's inside a dream, not walking the halls that will lead him towards his goal. It probably doesn't help that this is his first time setting foot in the school proper. During the dailyless test, what he's taken to calling it in his head, he kept his word to Nezu that he wouldn't say a word about it to anyone, even Aizawa-san. Izuku was able to see much of the school on the cameras, But it's very different being on the other side of them. He feels like a mouse placed in a maze with high walls without a real idea of where the destination is or how to get there, just the vague end goal in mind. That actually might be the point, now that Izuku thinks about it. Nezu-sensei was experimented on by scientists until a group of underground heroes, including the underground hero duo Airstep and Gran Torino, freed him from the lab some 30 years ago, becoming a pro-hero in record time. Most definitely not due to probable blackmail that the animal has on the Hero Commission that Izuku isn't dying to find out, and becoming staff at UA. Around that time, the school went through some massive upgrades, and Izuku thinks that the high ceilings and maze-like hallways were meant to simulate what he had gone through. There's also the whole Daedalus test that supports that theory. Moving into the dorms hadn't even been as nerve-wracking as walking in the main school building towards the first class of his first year. He's walking with his friends, but there's just something about being in a school building that makes Izuku want to cower and duck his head, to blend into the crowd and walk on fast feet and curl up at his desk in the back, making himself small. "I'm so excited for you, Izuku," Mum says in a crushing hug after he puts down the last of his things. He's on the second floor, which isn't too much of a trek, and he's grateful for a shorter distance to the kitchen for any late-night snacks. "I'm just worried. You're always so clumsy, coming home injured all the time. Are you sure you'll be okay?" His friends, who are lounging in his room, waiting for his mum to leave so they can help him set up, all stiffen minutely. Izuku isn't clumsy, and they know that any injuries he has are from his bullies. Does Izuku's mum really think he hurts himself? And they share a look. "Are we fine, Mum?" Izuku insists, squeezing her back. "Toshi and Sho will keep me out of trouble, right? Mei-chan and Neito maybe not so much, but they don't count." He chuckles at the protests and lets his mum squeeze him once more before she pulls back and cups his cheeks. "If you're sure, I'm just worried about you, that's all. You'll be training with people with quirks too," she says, stroking his cheeks with her thumbs, holding him as if it's the last time she'll see him. She traces the edge of the scar and Izuku lowers his eyes at the motion. The moment stills and awkwardly hangs in the air before she pinches his cheeks and says, "All right, I'll leave you and your friends to Aizawa-san. Be good kids." "I can't believe that I was the only one put in a different class," Neito bemoans dramatically, lifting his arms above his head and tipping his head back. "The only people I can stand are you, Izuku and Shouto. Mei, you don't count, you're a goddess. Don't give me that look. You're in charge of my equipment. You get special privileges. Hitoshi is on a thin line because he's a leech on two of my favourite people." His hands lower, but his tone is clearly still lamenting as he continues. "Oh, what did I do to suffer this fate alone?" One of Hitoshi's hands leaves the sanctuary of the warm coffee cup he has and signs lazily, "Shut up." The movement's lazy and broad before returning. His eyes are half-lidded and he's walking close to Shouto, who has a hand on his lower back, steering him down the right halls and making sure he doesn't run into people. "Never," Neito snarks back, before he abruptly pauses, realizing that Hitoshi replied in sign instead of words. "Oh, is today a no-words day or a migraine day?" Izuku removes one of his hands from his own coffee cup and signs "no words," at the same time that his purple-haired boyfriend drags a lethargic hand up to his face, pressing his eyes closed and tapping his temple twice. "Ah, bad luck. Sorry, Toshi," Neito says, voice much quieter. It's clear he also makes an effort to make his tone softer, so the tone doesn't drill into his ears and irritate it more. For all Neito says, he likes Hitoshi the least, It's clear he cares deeply about him. Do you want me to put you under siren song? Hey, Shinso-san, Izuku asks from where he's sprawled out on the other boy's bedroom floor. It's about 2 months before the entrance exam, and it's a rare day that it's just the two of them. Why's your quirk called brainwashing? 'Cause that's what it is, he grumbles back, head tipping upside down off the bed and looking down at him. I take over people's brains and make them do what I say. Not technically, Izuku says. Brainwashing is actually closer to long-term behavior and belief altering rather than short-term direct movement influence. In that way, I'd say your work is more similar to hypnosis. Through Izuku's talking, Hitoshi's eyebrows raise, wrinkling his forehead, and he turns over with a grunt, now looking down his nose at Izuku, resting his chin on his bed. Why does it sound like there's more? Izuku huffs and idly pats his fingers against the ground. Because there is, he says. I also have noticed a passive vocal effect of your quirk. Hitoshi tilts his head in question. Your voice is very melodic. I know it's part of your quirk because Neito copied it when we first met him, remember? A nod in reply. Hitoshi knows better than to try to get a word in. Even agreement can derail Izuku if he's not careful, so it's safer to not. Well, I was thinking that the purpose of that is to make other people want to respond to you more? Does that make sense? Another nod. So, I think it'd be really cool to call it Siren Song. Hitoshi lets out a contemplating hum, pursing his lips and touching them to his nose. I like the sound of that. Siren Song. Does it sound sexy, Midoriya? Shinso-san! Izuku gasps scandalously. That is not the point. Hitoshi grunts and waves a hand. No, it'll be worse when it wears off. He sighs tiredly, tipping his head into Shouto's shoulder with a sigh. His hand moves from the insomniac's lower back to wrap more firmly around his waist, and Izuku feels a small smile tug at his lips at the sight. He'll never get over the sight of his boyfriends being close and affectionate, even if it's because of one of Hitoshi's awful migraines. As much as he hates to think it, today Izuku is glad that the support classrooms are so far from the heroic ones. He loves Mei-chan, but she can be a lot, especially on mornings like this where Izuku can't bring himself to voice word and Hitoshi's brain pounds against his skull. Neito can rein himself in at these times, but Mei, regardless of her recent research into biochemistry and hormone science, has trouble sometimes with recognizing stress and reining herself in when she needs to. They walk in amiable silence, Neito talking quietly to Izuku and Shouto guiding a blind Hitoshi to their classrooms. They pass the room for 1B first and drop off Neito. Good luck in Class A without me. That class won't know what they're missing. He leers with a smirk and a flamboyant hand gesture in a way that tells Izuku he would have shouted it had Hitoshi not been in pain. You're just jealous. Izuku signs back, and the blonde scoffs. I'm not, he responds petulantly, and Izuku huffs an approximation of a laugh. Now shoo, you're blocking the door. Neito switches to sign as he continues. Plus, don't want to be late for your dad. Izuku's ears turn red and he makes an indignant noise and Shouto huffs, reaching out his hot hand and putting it on the green-haired boy's shoulders, guiding him away. He has a point, Izu, he says quietly. Hitoshi taps Shouto's leg with his coffee cupless hand. What? He flaps. Ah, Shouto hums. Neito called Aizawa-sensei Izu's dad and he got all red. Damn, Shinzo sighed sadly. Can't believe I misread Izuku. The door to Class 1A is large. It's not really any bigger than the one to Class B, but to Izuku it feels like it is. It could be to accommodate large mutation quirks, but Izuku thinks it's more likely that it's another intimidation tactic by Nezu. Not that he could ever prove it, but he can link it nonetheless. It also looks heavy but slides open easily and jerks to a stop with a bit of a bang, Izuku not having been ready for the ease of motion. Inside is strangely quiet. Izuku had been expecting rowdy classmates and quirks activated, but perhaps he had been a little too influenced by Aldera. There, the teachers were negligent at best and upright encouraging illegal quirk usage at the worst. But this is UA. Here, students actually have a standard they're held to, and they won't get away with using their quirks whenever they want. But even still, he was expecting at least some horsing around. Instead, he's met with nervous faces and quiet introductions. He recognizes them from the cameras he saw at the exam. They're not familiar to him like his friends or Katsuki, but he can tell that he's seen them all before, some more often than others. He would have been surprised that some of them, like the invisible girl in the floating uniform, made it in had he not known about the rescue points. He'd noticed some students being yanked by an invisible force and attributed it to a quirk. He didn't know it was a person, though. He assumed it was a telekinesis quirk, but this also makes sense. He also sees a girl that he thinks Hitoshi helped out. She has a short brown bob and pink spots on her cheeks below wide brown eyes. Her eyes snap to them when the door opens, just like the rest of the room, but when she sees them she stands up and walks towards them, stopping them as they make their way into their room. "You're that boy!" she exclaims with a bright smile, curling her hands into fists and excitedly holding them at her chest. "The one that helped me during the exam, right?" Hitoshi flinches at the loudness of her voice and turns his face into Shouto's shoulder with a hiss. "I'm sorry," Shouto says, lifting the hand from Hitoshi's hip to run through his hair and then rest across his eyes. "He has a migraine. Could you be quiet?" "Oh, I'm sorry," she says, a bit quieter, and Hitoshi leans further into Shouto. "I just wanted to thank you that day, but I saw you meet up with that blonde and green—" She cuts herself off when she sees Izuku beside them. "With him! Deku-san, right?" All three of them stiffen, and Hitoshi frowns under the hand on his face. "What did you just call him?" Shouto asks slowly. "Deku-san?" The girl replies with a tilt of her head. "I caught what the other blonde who met you guys outside said, and that's what we called him, right?" "It didn't cross your mind." Shouto starts and Izuku taps his arms, shaking his head. The heterochromatic boy sighs, changing what he was saying. "You think that his name is that?" Brown hair puffs as the girl shakes her head. "I mean, it's a nickname, right?" she says. "I think it's cute." Hitoshi barks a laugh, laced with pain and disbelief. He grips Shouto's hand and lifts it from his eyes, squinting down at the girl as Izuku subconsciously steps behind them, putting another barrier between himself and his classmates. "You heard an aggressor call him that, and you think it's cute," he growls. Even with his voice as strained as it is, it's captivating even in such a short burst, and Izuku leans into him, pressing his shoulder into his back. He taps his hip in reprimand, and Hitoshi tisks and slides Shouto's hand back onto his eyes. "Yeah, it sounds like Dikaru. Like, you can do it," she exclaims, her voice raising again. Izuku thinks she's very naive, unaware of how to read her surroundings properly at the very least. She's missed several signs of discomfort and clearly either doesn't know or care about her impact on their comfort. Before any of them can respond to her, a tired, familiar voice comes from the floor. "What do you think you're doing, blocking the door?" Everyone turns to stare at the floor in the doorway, and there lies Aizawa-sensei in a hideous yellow sleeping bag. He stands up and unzips it, letting it fall off his shoulders, and looks eerily like a moth emerging from a cocoon. "Don't just stare. Get to your seats." Most people who hadn't been sitting down, mostly just them by the door and a couple others, scrambled to their seats. Hitoshi and Shouto move slower, however, as the taller one has his eyes closed and covered once again. He's deposited at his desk in the back, by the windows, before Shouto moves to the desk next to him, Izuku having settled at the one in front of him. Hitoshi promptly rests his head on the desk. Welcome to the heroics course. I am your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shouto. He picks up his bag and shuffles inside for a moment before pulling out gym uniforms. Put these on and meet me outside. You have 15 minutes. Shinso, he calls before the boy can even begin to move. Head to Recovery Girl for some painkillers. Join us when the migraine goes down. Yes, sensei. Hitoshi signs without looking up. Todoroki. He turns to the other boy and cringes at Shoto's flinch. Go with him to the infirmary and stay with him until he feels better. If you're unable to join class today, both of you stay after tomorrow. Understood? Yes, sensei. Shouto parrots and stays seated. Izuku looks at them, wanting to stay, and looks at Aizawa-sensei pleadingly. Midoriya, Shinso doesn't need 2 escorts. Join the class. Izuku's lips thin and he nods, reluctantly grabbing a uniform and following the rest of the class. By the time he makes it to the locker room, most of the boys have already started changing, talking boisterously amongst themselves. With years' worth of practice fading into the background in locker rooms, Izuku weaves his way into the private stalls and changes quickly, shoving his uniform into a locker on the way out and quickly making his way outside. To his and Aizawa's utter lack of surprise, he's the first out. Problem child? The man says quietly, and Izuku looks up at him. Today is a Quirk apprehension test. It's no different than the regular physical tests from your previous schools, but everyone's allowed to use their quirks. Don't let that daunt you. I believe in you. He doesn't say. Not when he's here as Aizawa-sensei, and not Aizawa-san or Razorhead. Show them you can do it. Show me who you are. Izuku gives him a firm nod and a smile, just a bit wider than he genuinely feels. Aizawa, of course, knowing Izuku as he does, notices this, unlike his classmate, and looks at him in concern. You alright? Did anything happen before I came? Do I need to expel anyone? I'm fine, Eraser-sensei. Izuku signs. Just a no-talk day. He pauses then, and Aizawa-sensei raises a disbelieving eyebrow, prompting him to continue. Izuku sighs and continues slowly. Someone heard when Katsuki confronted me. She called me Deku. The last word is finger-spelled, and the pro-hero hisses a breath. She did what? He asks incredulously, and people finally start coming out of the locker rooms, once again saving Izuku from an awkward conversation. Or so Izuku thought. I was going to start by explaining what we're going to do today, he says, and it's only with the knowledge Izuku has of Aizawa-sensei that allows him to know how irritated he is. However, something has been brought to my attention that needs to be addressed first. His eyes rove over the students slowly, lingering on each student, and only after he's looked at them all individually does he continue. You are hero students at the #1 school in Japan. As of when you received your acceptance letters, you have become the cream of the crop, the best, and I expect you to show me that you deserve that title. As such, you need to be aware of the effect you have on people. You can't just do whatever you want anymore and get just a slap on the wrist. You can't act like hooligans and expect that not to reflect on your status here. What you do here will be on your permanent record. It will affect you in your lives as heroes, and it will affect your standing. He crosses his arms and tilts his head back slightly, so he can look down his nose at the class. You can't just say whatever you want anymore and not get any criticism. You can't be a bully, discriminatory, or cruel, and not have that follow you for the rest of your lives. And you can't plead ignorance when it comes back to haunt you. If I catch any behaviour out of line, there will be consequences. Last year, I expelled my entire class because they weren't taking training seriously. That is much less of an offence than messing up like that. Aizawa-sensei lets a grin spread across his face, all teeth and wide eyes, and Izuku is the only one of the 18 that doesn't shudder at the sight. Welcome to the hero course. This is the start of 3 years of hell, where I do all I can to prepare you for the forest fire that is the field of heroics. It's my job to make sure you don't die as soon as you graduate, and my job to make sure you don't mess up on camera. If at any time I feel like you don't meet my expectations, you're gone. Am I clear? Yes, sensei, the class exclaims. Deku-san! Uraraka exclaims once they're let out after the testing. Izuku was pleased to realize that it was the same as the tests he'd taken throughout school, and glad that he was able to place in the middle of the group. He was a bit disappointed that Aizawa-sensei's statement about the person coming in last being expelled wasn't followed through, but the hero must have a reason for keeping the small boy with balls on his head, so he won't question it for now. Shouto and Hitoshi also haven't come back from Recovery Girl's office yet either, so he's alone when the brown-haired girl calls him after class. He flinches at the name, and he can see Aizawa-sensei stop off to the side, listening. You were so cool! I didn't even see you using a quirk at all, and you beat like half the class. Izuku waves his hand in a dismissive gesture, uncomfortably. It wasn't that hard, really. He signs, but by the look of confusion on her face, she doesn't understand sign language. Uraraka, Aizawa-sensei's voice says, and Izuku is surprised by how close the man got without him noticing. It shows how uncomfortable he is, that he wasn't paying as much attention to his surroundings as he usually does. Why are you calling Midoriya by that name? Oh, because I heard someone outside of UA call him that. They met up after the exams, and I thought it was a cute nickname. She replies brightly, and Izuku grimaces. She doesn't notice, like before, and Aizawa-sensei bristles. And did Midoriya let you call him that? Well, no, she says, tilting her head. But he hasn't really said anything, and when I called him that earlier he responded, so I thought it was okay. It sounds like you can do it, so I thought it was cool. So you aren't aware then, Aizawa-sensei says, that it actually means useless, right? His voice is deceptively calm, but Izuku can see the clenching of his jaw and a stiffness in his neck. One of his hands twitches, a nervous tic he exhibits when he wants to use his capture weapon or grip onto it for emotional support. And Izuku moves to subtly stand behind him. Well? Uraraka stops to think. It also sounds like that, yeah, but I thought it sounded more like Deikaru, so it's fine, right? No, Aizawa-sensei says hardly, voice brokering no arguments. You calling your classmate by that name is degrading and dehumanizing. That, Uraraka, is a form of discrimination. Her voice pales as understanding dawns on her. Not only that, but it is incredibly rude to use a nickname on someone you don't know. I didn't think that I needed to teach university students basic etiquette, but here we are. Aizawa-san sighs and cocks a hip, seeming to sag in exhaustion. You don't know his past, and he didn't tell you that it was okay, so it's not. This won't happen again. The brunette nods her head quickly and, taking the dismissal for what it is, turns on her heel and scurries back to the girls' locker room. Izuku, he says, switching from Aizawa-sensei into Aizawa-san, into Dad. You alright, kiddo? Izuku shakes his head, signing, Today was a lot. I know. The hero replies with a sigh. You did good though. I'm proud of how far you've come. He can finally say it now that the other students are gone and he can shed his teacher facade, and he pulls Izuku to his chest. Go see your boyfriends, he says into Izuku's hair. I'm letting you all out early today so you can settle in at the dorms. I'll stop by later. With a final nod into Aizawa-san's chest, Izuku runs off to get his and his boyfriend's stuff from the classroom before finding them in the infirmary. He has a lot to tell them. Doubt. She has a short brown blob. Short, oh god. Short brown blob.